In this episode, we fit the fire extinguisher system and a race harness. I'm going to start with the fire extinguisher system, which is going to live kind of somewhere down here, or rather at least the bottle will do. Now, I'm probably actually not going to be able to finish this because I'm going to have to do some other jobs to allow me to finish the fire extinguisher. I will explain about that later. However, just to give you guys an idea, it's only been about 2 days since I finished welding in the roll cage, and there's a ton of bits of grinding dust and welding splatter and just rubbish from my shoes as I've gotten in and out of the car. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab the hoover, the paintbrush, and get all of this rubbish out. Yeah, I am probably going to create some more mess by fitting the fire extinguisher system, but I can clean that up afterwards. This is the fire extinguisher system that we're going to be fitting to the car. Now, yeah, this looks pretty shiny and new compared to the rest of our race car. However, this is mandatory according to our governing body's rulebook. And to be honest, as it's safety equipment, I don't really want to cheap out on it. This came from a company called JJC Rally. I will post a link below. They're not sponsored. However, when I had to contact them and ask them some details about this, they were very, very helpful. So I do commend them for that. I've never fitted one of these systems to a car. However, the plumbing on it is very similar to pneumatic systems that I have to do at work, which do have quite a bit of experience. First thing we've got to do though is mount this bottle. It comes with all the mounting bracketry, plumbing that you need, cables, release switches that you need. The only thing it doesn't come with hardware, and the brackets aren't pre-drilled, so we are going to have to do that. When you decide to mount something to the floor of your car, word of advice, make sure that there's nothing underneath that you're going to drill into. I actually was going to move this closer over to the centre tunnel there. However, I went and checked underneath the car. It's a good job I didn't go drilling some holes, because over here, roughly about there, is where my fuel line and brake lines run. So I've moved it over across to move it. That's actually quite nice, because this is going to give us a pretty decent run around the roll cage to mount the piping to and the release handle. So, first thing, I'm going to mount where I want my holes. I'm going to go drill it, and then I'm going to go find some hardware to bolt this in.
With the bottle in the correct position, I did exactly as I said I would and marked the position of where to drill the mounting bolt holes. The instructions for the fire suppression system says that the top of the bottle should be pointed towards the rear of the car. Our governing body's rules state that the servicing and manufacturing date of the bottle must be visible when it's mounted in the car, and finally our governing body states where the release cables can be mounted in the car. All of these had to be taken into consideration when figuring out where and in what orientation the bottle could be mounted. The main brackets drilled, I got everything lined back up in the car so that I could mark the position of the anti-submarining brackets. These brackets prevent the bottle from sliding back and forth in the event of hard acceleration, unlikely, it's a rover, or more likely, in the event of an accident. With the rear anti-submarining brackets marked, I centre punched it ready for drilling. For the time being I left the front one, I'll explain why in a little bit. To drilling the first hole, I realign the anti-submarine bracket with the main one to check the position of where to drill the second hole. As I got the first one correct, everything lined up, and so I just centre punched it where to drill. With the main brackets and rear anti-submarine bracket drilled, I realigned everything in the car so I could mark the floor where to drill. Just because it would otherwise annoy me, I made sure the brackets were parallel to the passenger's seat mounting bar. Once again, I raided the stash of used fasteners and found something suitable to bolt the brackets in place. This would be so much easier if some idiot hadn't put a roll cage in the way. With the first bracket bolted in place, I got the bottle back in place so I could align the second one and mark where I needed to drill the holes for that. With the brackets mounted, I used the clamps provided in the kit to secure the bottle to them. With the bottle attached to its brackets, the next step was to undo the bolts that secured the forwardmost bracket to the car. Bear with me, there is method in my madness here. The method in my madness was so that I could slide the forwardmost anti-submarine bracket onto the mount and mark up where to drill the holes. I purposely left marking up the position of these holes until now so that I could push it tight up against the bottle. This would mean that there would be as minimal gaps between the bottle and the bracket, so therefore would give the bottle as little room as possible to move. With all the brackets drilled, I got everything mounted to the car and so I could move on to the plumbing.
With the bottle now mounted, we can look at plumbing the fire suppression system. Now, these are designed to do two things. One, protect the driver, so there are a set of nozzles that's going to be around about the driver's footwell that will kind of spray back and down, and then also put out any engine bay fires. So there'll be another pipe that will go into the engine bay with another set of spray nozzles. I think I'm going to start with the driver's ones because that's the easier one. So we've got a load of tube, a load of fittings, a pipe cutter and mini pipe bender somewhere. So let's get this run and hopefully never ever have to use this.
The first piece of plumbing to fit was the adapter that threads into the bottle and allows the 8mm aluminium hardline provided in the kit to join up to it. With the fitting in the bottle, I pushed the end of the aluminium pipe into it and then marked the position of where I wanted to add the T-piece, which was the next part that needed to be fitted. With the pipe marked, I then just had to cut it to length. Normally when I'm fitting pneumatic systems like this at work, I am using plastic pipe which can be cut with a Stanley knife or pair of shears. However, to cut the aluminium pipe, I had to break out the pipe cutter that I typically use when making brake pipes. It isn't part of the kit, and if you don't have one, I highly recommend buying one. They're only a few quid on everybody's favourite online auction website, and they make a very nice cut without crushing the tube. With the first bit of pipe and next inline pipe fitting fitted, I connected the rest of the aluminium pipe and began routing it into the driver's footwell. The dash rail and part of the original steering column mount that I trimmed down and fitted in the last episode were ideal places to cable tie the pipe to and mount the nozzles that had to be aimed at the driver's feet. With the first of two spray nozzles fitted in the driver's footwell, I ran a length of pipe over to the other side of the steering column to fit the second one. Depending on whether you are using the kit in a single-seater race car or one with an additional seat, for example a rally car, the layout of the system changes a bit. For a single-seat race car like ours, 2 spray jets should be used in the driver's footwell and the rest in the engine bay, which I'll get onto a bit later in the episode.
Well, that's the passenger compartment plumbing done, so now we need to run the lines into the engine bay. That obviously means we've got to go through the bulkhead, and as per our technical guidance rules, we need to grommet any hole that we put a pipe through. There are some existing grommets in the bulkhead, but unfortunately I think they end up in slightly awkward places. I ideally need to go somewhere around about here, so I can end up in this top corner and clear the battery. So to get to the bulkhead, I'm going to have to take the heater out, which would be a lot easier if some idiot hadn't stuck a roll cage in the way.
Despite the roll cage, removing parts of the heater and blower motor was relatively straightforward. If I ever have to replace a cabin filter, it should be quite easy. I wish the same could be said about my Qashqai. With the hole drilled, I fitted the rubber grommet for the pipe to pass through. Before pushing the pipe through, I had to straighten it out a bit. The aluminium pipe provided in the kit is soft enough that you can bend it by hand. Just be careful when you are doing so that you don't kink it, and if you keep bending it back and forth or to around too tight of a radius, it will tear. The pipe pushed through the grommet into the engine bay. I pulled it through from the other side up to where the first of the 4 spray nozzles had to be fitted. The pipe in position, I secured it in place using a P-clip and utilising an existing threaded hole in the rover before refitting part of the heater system. With that done, I cut the pipe to length and joined it into the T-piece next to the bottle that was fitted earlier. I then secured the pipe using another P-clip, this time utilising one of the bottle mounting bracket bolts before refitting the last few parts of the heater system.
Well, with all that lot buttoned up, we can now move on to the plumbing in the engine bay.
The instructions for the fire suppression system says that the 4 spray nozzles to go in the engine bay should be placed in the 4 corners pointing towards the engine, with at least one preferably pointing towards the fuel lines. It also states that all spray nozzles should be securely mounted and not supported by their pipes. However, unlike other pneumatic fittings I've used, the ones in the kit didn't have any mounting points on them, so the best I could do was to secure the aluminium hardline to a bolt hole in the strut tower, once again using a P-clip, and then mounting the spray nozzles right next to it. The front 2 nozzles I had to drill some extra holes to mount the P-clips to, as there were none that I could utilise. This started off by me centre punching the slam panel where I wanted to drill the holes. With the holes drilled along with some more P-clips, I began routing the aluminium tube around the front of the engine bay and fitted the remaining spray nozzles.
With the fire suppression system all plumbed in, I now need to fit the release handle. Now in order to fit this, I need to know where to put it, and our rules clearly state that all drivers when fully restrained in a seat need to be able to access this, so the next job is to fit the seat and the race harness. At the beginning of this episode, you would have seen me hold up this race harness. Now this is not the harness that we're going to be using for one very good reason. This belt is dated 2015, and despite not having to have a race seat that's in date, we do have to have a harness that's in date. So obviously this isn't going to work. Now, I haven't gone and purchased the harness for this car because one of my teammates who is not from the UK found he can actually source them locally a bit cheaper than we can. So he's going to purchase it for us and meet us at the race, and we'll fit it on test and tune day. I'm going to use this one for mock-up purposes. The only slight difference from the harnesses we've been looking at, this is a 6-point, so temporarily I'm going to have to double up these straps on a mountain point. It's not too big of an issue. The rest of it though, however, the shoulder straps on the side are all the same. I do need to figure out some mounting points. Now, the ones for the shoulder straps are incorporated in the roll cage. Obviously, when I built the cage, I put the harness bar in the correct place. The middle one is not too big of an issue. That can be determined by the position of the seat. However, the lap straps, these ones, I do need to figure out. The one thing I am going to need, though, is a bunch of eyelets that I can hook this belt into. Now, I've already got these eyelet rings left over from another project. I've got 2 of them. These are 7/16 by 20 UNF, so I have got to try and source some nuts for these. And the third one I'm going to make out of this turnbuckle, which I bought because it was actually cheaper than just buying the eye bolt itself. This is M12, so this should be a bit easier. Anyway, with all that's been said, let's make some mounting points so I can screw these into. Now, for some reason, even in modern cars that use metric fasteners, seatbelt mounting points always seem to use imperial threads, which is quite fortunate for me because despite living in the UK, and yeah, we can get hold of imperial stuff, I'm running out of time. I don't really want to spend any more money, and I want to crack on with this so I don't have to wait around for bits to be delivered. This very neatly screws into this existing seatbelt mount here in the back. Now, obviously, we can't utilize this where it is. It's on completely the wrong side of the car and doesn't get the belts in the correct geometry. However, I don't think anybody's ever going to sit in the back of this thing, mainly because some idiot stuck a roll cage in the way. So what I'm going to do is drill the small spot weld out there and take this little panel with that nut out and do the same on the opposite side. And then we can utilize those nuts in a set of spreader plates where we can put them into the floor of the car and squeeze it in for the belt.
First step in removing the plates with a nut attached was to center punch the spot welds before attacking them with a spot weld drill. Fourth spot weld I mentioned and that you didn't see me drill out had actually missed the plate with a nut attached to it. The plate with a nut attached to it was however sandwiched between 2 others, so I had to use a hammer and chisel to prise them apart so I could get the nut plate out. With one side removed, it was then just a case of repeating the process on the other. Now, as you can imagine with anything safety related, there are rules and regulations, and the spreader plates for the harness attachment points are no different. Our governing body's rule book stated that they must be a minimum of 2.5 by 2.5 inch. When fitting spreader plates to sheet metal, it can be a good idea to make your top and bottom ones different sizes, otherwise they can act as a guillotine when force is applied. I therefore decided to make the top ones the minimum size of 2.5 by 2.5 inch, and the bottom ones about 3 by 3. Finally, before anyone says it, yes, I know you can buy these spreader plates. However, I was running out of time to get the car done, so didn't have time to wait for them to turn up, and I'm cheap, so I decided to make my own. I'm going to end the episode here of me cutting out the remaining 5 spreader plates. Come back next time to see me complete the install of the harness and fire suppression system. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please click that like button and share, it really does help out the channel. If you want to stay up to date on this build, then please hit that subscribe button and remember to turn on notifications. And finally, if you want to see more episodes in this build series, then please click the link that should be on screen now. Once again, thanks for watching.